Good afternoon, New Bedford Guide. Chris Resendes here with New Bedford Mayor Mitchell. And today's discussion with Mayor Mitchell is going to be charter schools. The charter schools have been a hot topic lately, and a lot of it has to do with funding. We have some schools that want to expand into the city. And with no further ado, we'll let the experts talk about it. Mayor Mitchell, Mayor, how are you today?
I'm doing all right, Chris. Great to be here.
Mayor Mitchell, I mean, you've talked about it. You've had, I've had people on my show discuss the issue. We've been talking about charter schools. I had the guys over from Alma Del Mar. I actually visited the school. It's a great place. But it seems to me that there's become an issue now with the expansion of the charter schools. They want to grow into the city, and two new schools, I believe, which is another 1,100 students. I think.
Well, they are applying for roughly 1,100 students, and then there are other applicants for more seats still. Other charter schools.
So there would be. So it's not just Alma, like we had discussed prior to the show. There are the other charter schools. What other charter schools do we have currently in the city? For those who don't know.
So the city has three charter schools. So Alma Del Mar is one. That's a K-8 school.
Yeah.
That's located on Belleville Avenue. There's the Global Learning Charter School, which is a grade 5 through 12 school that's located on Ashley Boulevard in the old St. Anthony School. And the last is a school called City on a Hill, which is a high school that's located downtown on Acushnet Avenue.
Now, with these schools, obviously the funding comes through the state, and it comes through which avenues? We have different Chapter 70, I believe, funding, which is directly from the state.
In Massachusetts, the funding doesn't go directly to charters. In some states, it does, but in our case, in Massachusetts, it goes directly to the districts. And then from the district's budget, the charter school budgets are paid for in effect. There's a transaction that involves the state, but essentially for accounting purposes, it's the money goes directly to the district, and then it's taken out from the district's budget and sent to the charters.
Now, with that money, it seems to me like I've read and you've publicly stated that you're totally not against the charter schools and the options. As a matter of fact, in the past, you've actually gone against some of the school committee members and their desire to not have charter school students attend New Bedford High School. Is that correct?
Well, so I'm not categorically against charter schools. I mean, my own feeling philosophically is that they do have a role in adding some level of competitiveness and choice to a community, and that's a good thing. And I buy into the original intent of charter schools, which is that they should be laboratories of teaching and curriculum and extracurricular. They're independent. They can do some things differently, and they're not part of a larger district. They're not part of a larger organization. But the reason why we have school districts is in part because of the economies of scale that come with it. And it sounds like a $5 word, but because we teach across the board, because we have a school district of some 13,000 students, we can do things like use money to run sports programs and to run extracurriculars and to have wraparound services for kids who need them, to give more assistance to special ed students and English language learner students. The more you dilute that population by taking money out, the less the economies of scale are, the less efficiently you can spend money, and so it hurts the bottom line. And my argument against these charter applications is primarily about finances. We're a city right now that's had tax increases, despite the city government's doing a very good job making what it does more efficient. We've had cuts in city services, including in public safety, that I would not like to have done, but we've seen the shrinking in certain areas that are very important for city residents.
A lot of the stuff that we see is the lack of ability to improve vehicles maintenance, and as well as the brownouts in the fire department. So this is directly tied in. It's what you're saying, the shortfall in the budget.
Well, money's not growing on trees, so it's got to come from somewhere. Although the state funds most of our school department, the reality is that the city still does spend a considerable amount of money in the school department, and the more that's spread out, the harder it is to achieve the efficiencies that allow us to provide all these extra services to kids.
Now, the way it works with the charter schools, the money follows the student. Am I correct in saying that?
That's the way it works in Massachusetts.
In Massachusetts. and then the money that falls to the student, the city then becomes reimbursed through the state. Or no, for each student that goes to the charter school, correct?
Partially. So under state law, there is a system by which in year one of the charter seat, the municipality is reimbursed 100% by the state, and then it goes 50%, and I think it's 25, 25, 25, 25 over the next 5 or 6 years. It may just be 5 years. In any event, that's by statute. The reality is that the legislature has not funded that formula, and this is something that folks from the charter communities agree with. There's a problem right now in that the state is only funding that first year of reimbursement. So once that expense is borne in year one, the district gets the money back. In year two, the district is on its own, and it has to come up with that money somehow, and that can happen two ways. You cut city services or you raise taxes.
Indeed. Now, there's a chart that you provided with the school assessments, and it does show this gap. I'm going to put that up on the screen now. This gap shows exactly what you stated. Now, I was told, and we discussed this prior to the show, that some of these shortfalls are not only the issue that the state's not funding them properly, legislated, and that seems to be the big issue. It's something that both yourself and the charter school director, principal, whatever his title is, agree on. What you don't agree on is they're saying that some of these students, I can read what they said, that you were receiving money still for students that are been out of the district for 10 years now.
Yeah, you mentioned that off air, and I don't know what they're referring to. I mean, the reality is that, we bear the expense of sending charter school students, and that is not offset by a reduction in cost dollar for dollar in the school district, and that's what that gap is, and that gap is growing every year, and to the point where I think this year it's like about $14 million. It's projected to continue to grow, and the money's got to come from somewhere. So if that gap is growing, and we can't reduce the expenses on the school side, it's got to come out of either existing city services or from taxpayers, and those are not good choices to make. And the reality here, Chris, is that we want to provide the best education possible for every kid in the city. Now, that's a mission that is different. That is different between the school district and the charters. The charters educate the kids who sign up for the lottery, right? The parents who know that there's a lottery going on, and not all of them do, sign up for the lottery and actually stay in the charter school. They're the ones who choose the school, and that's great. But we in the district have to educate every kid who is, between the ages of, 0 and 16 in the city, regardless of background, regardless of, their situation at home. And so that's a mission that we embrace, but it's a harder mission if money's being removed from our budget in order to educate a smaller segment of the population.
Now, they also have other numbers, such as a lower dropout rate, higher performance in these schools. I personally visited, and I've been in public schools. My wife's a New Bedford public educator. I'll tell you the truth, I was extremely impressed with Alma Del Mar. To be fair, I haven't visited any of the other schools. They seem to have very good structure. I've talked to some parents too. I've also done a little research on, what their feelings are, and so far so good. Some think it's a little too strict. I've heard that. As far as I'm concerned, there's no such thing. I think discipline is great, especially K-8. Builds a great foundation. They seem to have a little more flexibility than the public schools, and that seems to be a plus. And is this something that we can learn from these charter schools that we can try to implement in the public sector? I mean, they're getting 30% more of schooling per student than a public school. Like, that means that the longer days, longer school years, and the same, making more out of less. The same amount per student they're receiving, they're getting more out of it.
Right.
Now, I understand that we can go back to an issue that you've been trying to deal with for quite some time now. It's benefits in the pension system. That's also
Right.
a big issue, and why you can't compete with these. Is that something that is all part of this equation as well? Part of the
Well,
fight
they
against-
are, yeah. I mean, all those variables play in, Chris. I mean, it's so. So the short answer to your question is, yeah, I think there are things to learn. We should be exchanging ideas not only with charter schools but also with other school districts. And look, I've said this before, somewhat sarcastically in other contexts, but we in New Bedford don't run our enterprise like North Korea, right? We don't shut off the world to good ideas. We want to find the best ideas out there, even if they're not our own, and use them if it makes sense. And that includes from charter schools. And there are things in charter schools that the charter school model allows them to do that isn't as possible in the district school. So you named one of them, which is more learning time, right? So more learning time is better than less. And so if you can go a little bit later in the day, or if you can add days to the school year, that tends to be a good thing. I mean, the data shows. Now, the points of comparison in terms of performance on MCAS and other standardized tests are somewhat of an apples and oranges undertaking, in the sense that, charter schools, because they involve a lottery, do select not for race, not for income, not for ethnic background, but they do select for motivation, right? You've got to be a parent who has the wherewithal to know that there's a lottery, right? Not all of them do, and you got to know to sign your kid up, and you got to make sure your kid wants to go.
I challenged Will with that. I did, because I'm a person that totally believes, as the spouse of an educator, that it would take an involved parent to get that student into that building. Yeah. It just doesn't happen by chance. It doesn't happen by default like it does in the city. They countered with their outreach is what brings the students, that they're pulling out of the same neighborhoods that you guys are, that they actually target the harder hit areas to try to pull these kids out of the worst hit areas.
Well, as I said, I don't believe that they're selecting kids based on income. It's not, or based on race or even geography in the city, but they are. And they're not unique in this way. Charter schools, because it requires a selection, someone has to affirmatively say, I want to go there. There is a built-in bias for people who are motivated.
I do not disagree with you.
Yeah. And that's not a bad thing. All I'm saying is, don't take it the next step and say, look how good our scores are and against yours, right? And when they also on the back end have the ability to move out kids who aren't cutting it, right? In other words, if the kids aren't performing, they can be counseled out. Now,
and that's
some charter schools,
some
schools do that more than others. But all I'm saying is, these sort of facile comparisons between charter schools and districts, try to say, look how much better we're doing. Well, it's a little more complicated than that. And again, I emphasize, I'm not against all charter schools. We do have things to learn. We should be trying new stuff. My argument primarily is about, the comparisons about performance only go so far. And honestly, the financial situation in the city doesn't give us a lot of play in the joints.
Absolutely. I tend to agree a lot with what you just said. I did spend some time with Will in there, and I was thoroughly impressed with the operation. But that's just one. I have to disclose that my favorability to this charter school may change had I gone and taken the time that I don't have even to visit theirs. I don't even have the time to be here right now. I'm going to rush this done here pretty soon. I'm going to get out of here.
That's the thing that's tough about it. These things lend themselves to long discussions because it's complex. It really is.
It really is. So I can be swayed by that one example. In Alma Del Mar, I'm going to sit here and tell you I was thoroughly impressed. Now, my outlook on charter schools, I guarantee, would change had I visited 3 or 4 other ones. That also is the nicest, newest, shiny toy in the arsenal of charter schools. But I could learn from other ones, and I hadn't. So I really can't come to a conversation with yourself and say, I stand here, I stand there, because I still have to explore more. And I think this is part of what we're trying to accomplish here, is getting Will on, getting yourself on to discuss the matter, and to inform, your constituents on, hey, this decision that's coming up, this may have these outcomes, and good or bad. Now, you have no
I
say.
will-
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I think you're leading to something I was going to talk about. So the state makes these decisions, and the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, issues the charters by a vote of their board based on a recommendation of the Education Commissioner. Now, what I've said to them and will continue to say is, we want the best for every kid. Of course, they're in the business of educating kids. I'm in the business of educating kids as the chair of the school committee, as the mayor also, right? But I'm also in the business of making sure the streets are safe, that they're clean, that fires are put out, that we have libraries that are active, that veterans are taken care of, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not to mention the zoo and the airport, right? All that stuff. So, when I make decisions, it's with the city's best interests in mind. And these things, can be very siloed decisions on charter schools that have ripple effects and to everything else that we do as a city government and the wallets of taxpayers, right? So, I have to factor in all this stuff when it comes to these charter decisions.
I may have come in here, quite frankly, with a little bit of, hey, this guy's really against these, but what you just said clarified things a little more for me. When I go to the school and Will comes to me and talks to me passionately about his school and wanting to expand it, and I sit there and I see these kids having a great time, being educated correctly, it was amazing. I can't talk any higher than I have about the school. But it's tunnel vision. They're just worried about Alma Del Mar, where you yourself and the council members and the school committee members and the superintendent and everyone else has to also think about other stuff in the city and other infrastructure. And it wouldn't be fair for me to sit here and not side with you on that aspect and that, thought process. Hey, listen, Chris, or New Bedford Guide and whoever's watching. Not only do I see the value in a charter school, I do, and you've said that, but I can't forget the rest of the stuff I'm responsible for. And voted as mayor, I understand that a little better now because I kind of put the blinders on coming in here. We're talking about charter schools, and that's the topic at hand, and you kind of tend to forget the rest of the stuff that you're responsible for. So I'm glad you explained that. Let's move on to, segue on to the next topic, which is, let's say the school, what board was it that approves it?
The Board of Elementary and Secondary Education.
Those guys. They approve it.
Yeah.
What happens to New Bedford? How do you account for it? And are you in the process? Have you I'm sure you do, a backup plan? Listen, we already know what we're cutting. And have you spoken to your managers in the field, the fire department, the chief of the police?
So certainly have talked to Ari Sky, our CFO, to think about what we will have to reduce on the city side, which is not an easy discussion to have because, there isn't a lot of fat in the budget. There's frankly no fat in the budget. And we've been very effective in the last few years in building lots of efficiencies into the budget, whether it's from, all the energy savings because of all the LED lighting and the solar panels and all that stuff, or the realignment of city government, or things as simple as, moving to things like biweekly and pay and direct deposit, as mundane as that is, that saved the city thousands and thousands of dollars. We've been good at that because we know we're things are pretty tight. But another charter school is going to impose a significant cost on the city, and it's one that is, can just be sort of, managed around. It can't. It's too much. So, so he's taking a look at that. I mean, this decision's a few months away, but we want to at least be alert to it and be transparent about why we take any particular step.
You do have to plan ahead for all these. I know that the general guy in public here, Joe Public, that says, hey, I'm not going to be able to get overtime hours in the winter because I generally get laid off, and then comes less income and less money to spend.
Yeah.
So, you gotta treat your city like
as I was getting at before, these decisions have consequences, and a lot of, part of the problem here is part of the difficulty from where I sit, as I was getting at before, is that, the state makes these decisions, and it's just one component of state government. It's not all the components of state government. You might be able to, appreciate all the facets of operating a city like New Bedford.
Absolutely.
It's just one that says, in education, you've got to spend more money in this particular place.
So this board doesn't factor anything, but like they don't look at the other aspects of.
Well, I'm going to try to persuade them to to look at the.
Now you
the
say
broader picture.
I haven't heard much out of Senator Montigny or Representative Cabral. Are you using them to leverage a better situation for your
Well, I will have some more
constituents?
discussions with the state delegation. I mean, ordinarily I interact directly with those folks. So with the board and the commissioner and the state secretaries and all that. So I'll continue to do that. But if we can get the support of the state delegation, I'm sure that won't hurt.
Now, I'm going to take a question from somebody here, and it says, John DeMello says, can New Bedford Public Schools access additional and separate funds to have vocational classes similar to New Bedford Voc, but in different fields? Fishing industry, solar energy, wind energy. I had former Mayor Lang on, and I'm a proponent totally of vocational. As we can tell in the world, the trades jobs are in need, and there's plenty of unemployed bachelor degrees and master's degrees and doctors out there. But when I asked this question, it's right after you told me the city's broke. So what changes can we implement? Are there other federal funding that we can?
No, there is some. We've been working on it. Yeah, so it's through we get funding through what's called the state's Chapter 74 program, which doles out a considerable amount of money to vocational education. It's primarily how Greater New Bedford VocTech is funded.
Yes.
And the school districts created last year a position to start to create those programs. I mean, New Bedford High School, I think there are a lot of folks who are interested in those in trade type programs for their kids at New Bedford High, and I think we're going to pursue that. Obviously, New Bedford High is not going to become a second vocational school in the city, right? It's a comprehensive high school that's, as any city of any size would have to have, right? Not everybody wants to go into a trade. Right?
But you start doing that stuff. I mean, we've seen Voc kind of reinvent itself in the past 2 decades. You have a lot of kids, being trained for trades and then still going off to a 4-year school with an easy transition because they've stepped up on their other educational aspects of teaching, not just the vocational. So yes, I mean, you are working on it is the bottom line answer.
Yeah.
Currently there are. That's excellent. I'm just looking through the questions right now So what can we do as a city to become less dependent from state and federal red tape? More.
I'd love to know that answer. Yeah, no, we're greatly constrained. If you look at our budget, about 3/4 of it is spoken for before the city does anything, and of that remaining quarter, about half of that is for public safety, which is for a lot of reasons it's hard to cut. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of it, I mean, some 30 city departments are that last 12 or 13%. Is not a lot of give. I mean, in Massachusetts, the state has a great deal of control over municipal decision making. I happen to be one that feels very strongly that cities and towns in the state need more autonomy than they have right now. And I mean, there are constraints that go back centuries, like the fact, like the very borders of the city. You would not draw New Bedford the way it is now, right? You draw it much bigger, so you have more, land to draw on for a tax base and be able to pay for services, right? It's the same economies of scale argument. I don't think that's about to change anytime soon. No. But those are some of the constraints that we live under. That's why we work very hard at economic development and to build the tax base out. That's why we do things like work on modernizing the port and building up the downtown and building out the industrial park and looking at the golf course for a second industrial park. All these things are to build the tax base so that we have, a little more financial flexibility.
Yeah. You're trying to grow as a city in order to pay for the future bills.
Yeah, and it's working. We're making progress on there, but a lot of some of those bills are going up way too fast.
Yeah, I mean, inflation grows at a high rate. Dollar doesn't go as long as it used to, and There are more needs now.
Well, so there are big expenses. So the biggest expenses driving the budgets are pensions and healthcare and charter schools.
Where are we there on the pensions and healthcare?
I
Have
think
we made any way?
so we've made a little bit of headway on healthcare, not nearly as much as we should, but I think we've made some. On pensions continue to grow as the projected growth in the pension fund is starting to get smaller because the actuarials are saying, well, the stock market's not going to grow as fast as it has in the last few years. That means we have in our annual allotment to the pension fund, that's going to go up. And then we've been talking about charter schools. The charter school, what we've been discussing, Chris, really puts a strain on our budget.
I'm going to go back to the charter schools. We discussed that you've been lobbying that lot of word board, the school, whatever board that approves these charter schools. Is legislated, I'm going to go back to the local delegation. Are they, because you said you're not getting paid back. You're not getting these reimbursements that you're supposed to.
No, yeah, we've made this argument plenty of times. It's
would that help?
It would help for sure. Yeah, that would help. There's a related issue here about state education aid and whether the formula for state aid is appropriate in this day and age. I've argued that it is not, that the state formula doesn't take adequate consideration of the kinds of expenses that cities either uniquely experience or experience much more acutely. That's more ELL students, more special ed students, higher pension costs. I mean, all these things add up. And I've argued, well, we should be changing the state formula to put cities in the state like New Bedford on a more competitive
plan. So standardizing cities and towns rather than looking at them individually for their needs as a city.
Well, it is. So state education aid is based on a number of things. It's primarily income in the district, but it's also things like the number of ELL students and special ed students and so forth. And there are, the more ELL students you have, there's a formula for how much more aid you get. Formula. There have been threats of lawsuits in years past. I think we're getting to a point where, the differences are great. So in New Bedford, for instance, per pupil spending is about $14,000 a year. And actually some of the towns surrounding it, Dartmouth is lower, Fairhaven's actually lower. But then you go up to the Boston suburbs and you've got to the western suburbs of Boston, all those wealthy towns. I mean, it's common to find towns whose per pupil spending is $24,000, $25,000 a year. It's significantly more.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to have to revisit this, especially with the chief financial.
It's a lot to talk about. You got to give yourself more time, Chris.
I was told 20 minutes, a half hour, or else I would have had you come on a Thursday night, and But there's so much more to this, and it's not right for yourself or for the charter schools. It's not fair to not lay out all the facts and all the numbers. I really think that everybody should have a voice. But I took something out of this conversation is that they are looking at just the aspect of schools, where you have to look at a whole bunch of other stuff. And you are responsible. You're the president of New Bedford. Well, and you have to make sure all your people are taken care of. And it's just there's potholes that still need to be fixed. There's all that stuff that
you found a pothole. Huh? You found a pothole? Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't know. The common. It's like
I never heard it. No.
I bet you when you ran for mayor, you never thought, Jesus, I'm going to hear about potholes for the next however many years.
Yeah, it's all right. It's okay. We fixed those too.
Let me get a couple questions in from the viewers. They took the time to write them, so we'll give them a few seconds, quick answers. Where is the city in terms of transforming Cushing Avenue into an international marketplace as called for in the redevelopment strategic plan?
So we've made some headway in the last few years. We've totally rebuilt the roadway from Coggeshall Street, the Coggeshall Street intersection of Route 18 all the way up to about Hawley Street. We've also set aside some funding for some infrastructure improvements on the way up. from there, northward from there. That's going to have to happen over the next several years. I say several because the project will be a big one, but there's a lot of underground utilities that are quite old and that will have to be replaced. And we've seen in the last year all the work that's been done on Cogswell Street. That was primarily about what was underground and not so much on the surface, right?
Yes.
And so that's going to have to get done. You know, it can get a little dicey on the avenue doing that kind of work because you have all the shop owners who, you know, who really feel the squeeze when you close the roadway. And so, you know, we've tried to do it in a segmented way. So the next phases are, you know, probably a couple of years out still. Yeah.
I drop off my kid down Grape Street. And they're working on that, and you know,
that'll get done faster because that doesn't involve too much underground.
I'm just trying to bring into perspective how inconvenient it can be for a business or you know, or just the neighborhood, and especially in a struggling area. Let's just face it, the North End isn't as busy as it used to be.
No, it's not.
And you've been trying to. I noticed you're doing a what was that you're at?
The Lofty Ave initiative. Yeah, and that's a good thing. You know, so we launched that. That's a big promotion of not only shops but especially the restaurants. And you know, there are more shops and restaurants, it turns out, on the Ave than there are in the downtown. It's smaller. They don't have the same traffic, but they're there. And so you know the Ave over the years has come and gone, and it comes back all the time because it's you know, it's a mixed use, very dense neighborhood. People walk to either restaurants or shops, and so there's always this customer base there. And in the years ahead, I think one of the big things that's going to help us is, you know, not only the infrastructure work along Cogswell and up the Ave, but also the Riverwalk. Once that, you know, we're able to, once the EPA is done, we get in there, we create something really cool in that space. That's going to raise up the entire near North End, it seems to me.
You know, the walk that you did in the South End, you know, took years to do, a couple of administrations to get it finally done, but it's beautiful and it's a great addition to the city. And I think that the Riverwalk down that area will do the same with that same result. Last question comes from Michael Amaral. Updates on the reconfiguration of Kings Highway. When will it begin? Any developments with Kings Plaza, Fieldstone Plaza, former Building 19? And wow, he asked a lot of questions.
It's a lot of them.
Yeah, just in that area.
I'll talk generally. So the Kings Highway off ramp is in what's called the Transportation Improvement Plan queue, the TIP plan. That's the state program for projects like that. That's an example of a TIP project is the Route 18 project in the South End, right? That's going on. That's about a $10 million project. So one of the next ones in line is Kings Highway. As far as the development of that property, the plaza, and the former Building 19 site, you know, different owners. One is a local owner. In the case of the Building 19 site, I would bet that one turns into something more quickly. Probably retail. The owner, Paul Bishens, who's a long time New Bedford real estate developer, died last year, and so his son has taken over, and that transition, I think, has probably slowed things up a little bit. In the case of Kings Highway, that is owned by a real estate investment trust from out of state, and they've marketed it for big box retail, which is fine there as long as it meshes with any train station that ends up getting built there. So
you loaded that into the question.
Yeah, I'm sure that's in there. So I'll address that too. So yeah, so the train station is slated to go there once the Stoughton route is built. It's not slated for the Middleborough route. And so there's retail and some mixed use in there. It could work really well with the highway connection. But that's for our part, that's a private owner looking for a private party to transact with, and so there's only so much the city can do.
Absolutely, you
to make
you
that
don't want to
happen.
constrain too much business. You want to make it more.
No, we're not constrained, but it's we're not in a position to accelerate. We help with people, we offer help, but at the end of the day, they're going to decide to whom to sell.
Any idea on the MBTA stop? What do you think? What is your crystal ball telling you?
In terms of
When's it going to happen?
Yeah, well, I think.
I'm not going to hold you to it, but.
Well, I mean, I'm not in the state legislature after all, but I think, I think it'll happen. I think the Middleborough route will happen. It's a lot cheaper than the Stoughton route, but the problem with the Middleborough route is that it's the scenic route to Boston. It's 90 minutes just on the train, never mind the time on either end of commute.
Yes.
So, I think it's a good thing. It'll be a good thing. It is not going to be the be all end all that it's often made out to be. I mean, the emphasis in my administration all along is to grow our economy organically here, emphasize maritime, emphasize the downtown, the industrial park, education. That's how you grow an economy. You have to be focused on that rather than just focusing on one project. That project, if we have passenger rail service to Boston, that'll be a good thing. It'll be one more good reason for people to live here, but it ain't the only thing.
Absolutely. Mayor, is there anything you want to touch upon quickly that we missed in this conversation? Anything you want to let your constituents know? Or hear?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we touched on a lot of stuff, but I think the charter school debate sometimes pits charters and districts, but we're all trying to educate kids in the end, and the best we can. And I think my record shows that we've been working very hard to make that happen over the last few years. And, from where I sit, I need to make sure the rest of the city is operating well as possible in light of the resources that we have available.
Excellent, excellent. And the last comment I'll put up is not many politicians will agree to a live, unedited and wide-ranging interview on so many challenging issues.
Well, you told me before you were just going to throw softballs at me.
Is that what I said? I'll tell you what I said is that, guys, I don't have these guests on. New Bedford Guide isn't here to throw landmines for our guests. The tough questions that we do ask, I tend to myself. I can't speak for anybody else who asks questions. I don't want to blindside any of our guests for many reasons. So I give them a chance to put in their head what they, and the facts are the facts, because if the response is untruthful, it'll come out. So
it does. Well, so I mean, it's the same way. I mean, people can ask the questions they ask, and you read a lot of theirs when I go on the radio, as I do every week, as I have it's in my entire time in office. People can call up and ask whatever they want, and if I don't know the answer, I'll say I don't know, and I'll go find out. Yeah. I'll find out the answer, but that's what people are entitled to.
Absolutely. Mayor, thank you very much. New Bedford Guide viewers, thank you for your viewership. And I think 2 weeks now, every 2 weeks, Jonathan, we're doing these, or every week? Every week. Mike will be on next week because I got to run. I got to go pick up my son. Everybody, enjoy your day. Stay dry, and appreciate you tuning in this week. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Chris.